Welcome to Wellspring on the Air. I'm Mario de Armas, a therapist at Wellspring, and the host of today's show about how to talk to our kids about drugs and alcohol. Joining me to broach this very important topic is Nicole Alfonso. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you, Mario.
And it is not Alonso, it's
exactly.
Alfonso. And I caught myself midway through.
It's all good, Alfonso, no problem.
Thank you so much, and it's so awesome to have you on here. We're gonna help prepare, by really covering this subject in a thorough way and, from different angles and perspectives. So just so eager to jump right in. And as we do that, Nicole, just provide a little background for everybody in terms of who you are, what you do at Wellspring, what you dedicate your time towards.
Of course. So thank you, Mario, for having me today. I like being on the other side of this. I am a host of the podcast as well, and the radio show. I am, first of all, married 15 years, have two children, ages 13 and 10. And I am a counselor here at Wellspring, been here for 6 years. I love working here. I do a little bit of everything. I host a radio show at times. I also direct our Bounce Trauma Resolution program for kids and youth. I obviously see clients, and I supervise interns as well. So I do a little bit of everything. I love it. It keeps it fun and adventurous.
And, adventure is the operative word. This is not an easy topic to discuss. Therefore, it's a very important topic to discuss. So just starting off, before we even talk about this subject, what are different reasons that kids actually use drugs in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's important in order to maybe be more of in a preventive side, kind of know what is the reasons, right? Why kids decide, you know what, I'm going to try this out, or I'm going to go with the flow with whatever's happening. The first one is definitely to fit in, that peer pressure, that wanting to belong to a group or be seen as one of the cool kids or anything like that. So fitting in to feel good. And if we're not feeling good within ourselves naturally, we're going to look for other things to make us feel good, right? And so that obviously entails drugs and alcohol. And so if you don't feel well internally, you're going to try to find something to do that with. And so that might be a reason, feeling good, to feel better, right? So again, I'm stressed, life is hard, too many pressures, and I need to feel better. I need to kind of relax. I need to calm down. And so that could possibly be a way of kids using to calm down. To perform better, okay? Or even distress, like I said before. So to do better at school, to do better at whatever they're doing, they feel like maybe that would help. Of course, to experiment, curiosity, right? If we do not know about it, or we don't, if we think it could be good or it could be fun, then we're going to try to experiment and be curious. And lastly is to numb out and disconnect from yourself. Okay. And so these are just some of the reasons why kids might use drugs in the first place, kind of that first time type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because I have a friend in recovery, and one of the words that he would use oftentimes is, I needed to numb out or to medicate the pain. Mm-hmm. Those were the two operative words when it came to his addiction.
Yeah.
And describing his past, but he would say numb out or medicate the pain.
Yeah.
In reference to that.
That makes sense. Yeah. When there's a lot of pain, we don't want to feel pain. We're smart people. We don't want to feel pain. Yeah.
Absolutely. What would be some risk factors that would make kids more likely to turn to drugs?
All right. So there is definitely a few of those, and I want to get into those. First of all, a family history of addiction. So if there's a family member that has had a struggle with addiction, there is a possibility that there is a genetic predisposition. And that means that if you do have a family member with addiction issues, you have a 30% greater chance of becoming an addict yourself. It's kind of like they say, it's kind of in your blood type of thing, you know? So that would be one risk factor. The second would be a mental health disorder. So if you do struggle with depression, if there's anxiety, if there's anything that, you know, could make ADHD, other mental disorders that you need to work through, but you don't have the coping skills to do it, then you might turn right to drugs and alcohol to do it. A lack of family involvement, kids that are distant and lack bonding within their internal family, right? So mom, dad, siblings, right? That inner circle, there's not healthy attachments, there's lack of involvement. And so they might that might be a risk factor as well. Another risk factor is early use. Statistics do say that the earlier you use, the bigger the chance of you becoming an addict. So if early use happens, that is a risk factor for future use. Taking a highly addictive drug. So if you were to, you know, the first time you use a drug, it's a highly addictive drug, you will be more likely to fall into addiction because that drug is highly addictive. And then, like I mentioned earlier, an ADHD diagnosis, people with ADHD due to impulsivity might be at greater risk. Actually, it does say 30% greater risk for using drugs and alcohol than regular population. So these are some risk factors.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that comes to my mind is if there's a dependency stemming from, you know, the use during adolescence, you know, early on, and we learn to rely on that, then when discomfort hits, when crisis hits, when a relationship ends, when a fight occurs at home, rather than sitting with that emotion, we turn to that drug of choice that temporarily alleviates it to some degree, but creates the long-term issue.
Correct. You know, you use it as a coping skill, right? And then that's the go-to coping skill. It's not good, but that's kind of what you know to do, you know? Yeah. I mean, plenty of adults do that. And so that's just kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And being that the case, how do we actually get to a point where we talk to our kids about drugs and alcohol? Like, how do we approach it?
Yeah, so I think this is important. You know, I think, you know, when I was growing up, nobody ever talked to me about alcohol and drugs. You know, it just was not a topic in my home. I did grow up with a father that was an alcoholic, thankfully been in recovery over 14 years now. But he, you know, it was normal. Alcohol drinking was normal in my family. It was nothing to be like, that's odd or it's just part of my family. And so one of the things I think parents need to know is that you do need to start early educating children, because children see people drinking early on, especially in your home, right? Or even going out to a baseball game, which we've been to, and there's been, you know, that drunk person in the background shouting and, you know, all crazy. And then we go to other people's homes and they're drinking, right? And so they, you know, they're always going to be around it. They're just not asking what it is, or they just, you know, it's kind of normal. So we got to start being really honest about what the effects of drinking are, you know? And they say that between the ages of 5 and 7, you should start these discussions. And when possible, look at teachable moments. And I'll say this, I remember we went to an island as a family for a family trip, and we smelled marijuana on just walking down the beach. And I pointed it out to my son. My son must have been 6 or 7 years, I mean, young. And I was like, that is what marijuana smells like. We spoke about what it does to your brain and how it makes you feel. Early on, we had that conversation. It's not taboo. It's not something, it's just, it is what it is. This is around. This is what we are, you know, in our society going to have conversations about. So another thing is, if a family member drinks while they're having dinner, maybe they drink wine, you can talk about healthy, responsible drinking, right? And when I was doing research to do the show, I found that it takes 4 to 5 beers to get drunk, also known as an altered judgment state, right?
Interesting. Yep.
In 1 hour. So if you drink 4 to 5 beers in 1 hour, you could get drunk. Okay. Now, this varies because not everybody drinks 4 to 5 beers in 1 hour. Maybe they drink 4 beers in a 4-hour span, right? And so educating kids about what this is, right? Drinking responsibly. Or even if your kid is watching a TV show, a commercial comes on, a beer commercial comes on, right? And it's like, this commercial is like, everybody's having fun, da, 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 da. Reality check. It's not always like that, right? Another good example is, I remember my son was, I must have been, again, 6 or 7 years old. And, he's been playing baseball from a really young age, 4 years old. And he really liked this player. And we woke up one morning and this player had an accident in a boat and had died. And we were going to go watch this team the next day. And we had to talk to him about, you make decisions when you're under the influence that you wouldn't if you weren't under the influence. And that's that piece of judgment, right? Like that it really messes up your judgment. And so really finding moments that you can use as examples to explain to your kids what does come out of abusing certain drugs and alcohols, right? Another thing is there's a statistic that says that environmental stressors and gene expression represent 40 to 60% of an individual's addiction risk. So it's important to note that children with a family history, again, I said this earlier, but of substance abuse are more likely to become substance users. So I think it's actually important to say that. Like, for example, I have addiction in my family, right? And my son knows this. My son knows that there's a higher propensity for him to become addicted because it does have a genetic component. So we have these conversations openly. And I think that that's healthy. The more information, knowledge we give our children, the better prepared they are to make decisions. So this is all really important as far as how to converse with your children. And really important, last thing I'll say on this is you need to make sure you express your views about the subject. Okay. If you don't approve as a parent of smoking, drinking, vaping, whatever, you need to explain and the reasons why. Why are the reasons that this rule is in our home? And, have a discussion with your child so that they understand that there is it's not acceptable and that it's not safe. There's no such thing as safe drug use. Okay. There's no such thing because we don't know what's in drugs anymore,
Definitely.
So you need, as parents, we do need to be clear, like it's not acceptable. If you're going to go ahead and be follow the law, then we know that before the age of 21, they shouldn't be drinking. Now, if you're not going to do that, you're going to have to explain a reason for that, parents. And so be ready, because the law says that you shouldn't, that you can't drink under the age of 21. So how are you going to have that conversation if it's okay with your family,
That it just makes me so grateful for my dad that started talking to us at the age of 5 or 6. And I can remember being there with my G.I. Joe action figures or playing WWE. Back then it was called WWF with my Macho Man versus Hulk Hogan. And my dad stopping in front of me and saying, drugs will do this, this, and this, and this. I'm like, I barely know how to speak. And I'm there with my action figures. But he made it a point to educate us early on about the consequences, about circumstances where it can arise. And he ingrained this sense of awareness on a consistent basis. At random moments, I'd be throwing the football. Yeah, you could throw the football, but drugs will kill you. Da, 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 da. I'm like, wow, Papi. But in such a clear way that I became very cognizant of it in my latter years. So, Nicole, there's so many good elements, including some huge facts about each drug and their effects that we'll get back to on the second portion of our show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Wellspring on the Air. This is Mario de Armas. And if you're just joining our show, our topic today is how to talk to our kids about drugs with Nicole Veles Alfonso. Want to make sure that I get that on point today. And so far, we've talked about the various risk factors and the importance of how parents can broach this subject with their kids and the underlying causes and conditions that often compel an adolescent or adult to gravitate towards drugs and alcohol. If you joined us late, you can find us on your favorite podcast channel, on Wellspring on the Air, or on our website blog page at wellspringmiami.org. Just search for this topic. So, Nicole, we were talking about the importance of educating yourself and the different details that correspond to certain substances. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think when speaking to our kids, we got to know what we're talking about. You know, we can't just kind of inventarnos la cosa, like we say, just kind of figure it, you know, go wing it, right? No, we can't do that. We really do need to know, what does alcohol do? What does marijuana do to you? Inhalants, nicotine, vaping, all those things. And so the more we know, the clearer we will be in our instructions to our kids. And so when we talk to them, we got to talk about the facts. You know, drinking alcohol, getting drunk affects your judgment. Okay. It makes people take dangerous risks. It makes you get behind the wheel and possibly, you know, get into an accident. It can make you have sex against your will or before you're ready. You can have unprotected sex if you're under the influence and you're not paying much attention, and you risk sexually transmitted diseases or pregnancy. And you can lose inhibitions. There could be things like getting hurt, violently hit, or even raped. I mean, these are things that actually happen. Okay, this is not like, this is true. This happens.
Yep.
In high school, it happens. In college, it happens. So that's on drinking. Now, marijuana causes short-term memory. There is significant impaired function academically that can happen because of marijuana use. And also, we're talking about a brain that is developing that will be altered because of use. And of course, it is at this point, it is still illegal, and you can get into some serious legal issues, have a record, things like that, that will ruin some of your future. So I would say sit down, Google the effects of these things so that you know what to tell your children, okay? Alcohol is a factor on many teen deaths, okay, including obviously accidents, alcohol poisoning, all right, and suicide. There's also these things called bath salts. That's not like soaps or perfumes. It's actually a man-made crystallized drug that contains different types of drugs put in there, stimulants, psychoactive drugs, and these can really cause some really bad reactions. Things, you know, sometimes people feel like they have superpowers. I mean, if people have jumped out of, you know, buildings, I mean, you just really have to be careful. Nicotine is very addictive. It is actually quite bad for you. It causes 12 types of cancer. I know we don't focus so much on nicotine anymore. It's kind of normal, right? But some of the things that might help is that they are expensive. Cigarettes are like $10 a box at this point, and that's quite an expensive habit. You get, you know, greater risk of lung disease, of heart disease. I mean, tons of stuff, and just obviously, so nicotine. And then now, you know, when we talk about other drugs like cocaine or pills, right? Ecstasy. I mean, all these other drugs that are out there in the world of you know, in the world, we have to remember that nowadays there's this fentanyl drug, right? And this fentanyl drug is something that, you know, even if you touch it, you can die. I mean, that's insane. That's crazy. And they could put fentanyl in any drug on the market. You know, it's the new thing. So, you know, a few years back, there was this trend where kids would bring their medicine, you know, the parents' medicine from their cabinet and put it all in a bowl, and you just grab whatever and take it. It's just crazy. Now that, you know, now you don't even know at this point, if you buy something, what it has. So it's just really important that when again, this is something that has come out in the news lately, and I have shared that with my kids. We have to tell them the reality of what happens. People die every day. One drug use, they die. So we have to explain this to them. Healthy fear of drugs and alcohol is healthy. Okay.
Oh, no question about it. No question about it.
Yeah, I mean, so we do have to be pretty honest about it. Now, this is just important information. Educate yourself. Make sure you know what these drugs do, and you can explain it to your children with confidence.
It really is alarming. During my high school and college years, it was about, a roofie placing it in someone's drink, and then they're not aware of what took place, where they wound up, and disoriented. That was so destructive, and it made a comeback later on in the 2000s as well. And then even something like Adderall that was taken for ADHD, people now use for all-nighters. They use to stay awake during school hours, and the effects of that are so dangerous. So people oftentimes lack that education, or they need that immediate resolution to a problem without knowing the repercussions of drugs and their magnitude. So it is so important to educate yourself, Nicole, and thank you so much for emphasizing that. I think this topic oftentimes causes people to be resistant and the defenses go up. Yeah. So how do parents express these expectations about alcohol and drugs, vaping, etc., in a way that's supportive?
Yeah. So I think that, as parents, our main role is to really teach our kids and guide our kids to make positive, good choices for themselves so they could have a good future and they could be independent, healthy adults, right? And so your child is going to be like, you know what, Mom, you're making a big deal out of this. I can stop when I'm older. You did it when you were a kid. And I want you guys to just stay calm when they say this and just make sure you just make your point, communicate your clear expectations, be clear about your views on drugs and alcohol, why those views exist. And if you have a strict policy, no amount of smoking, drinking, or drug use is okay with me. You need to be really honest about that and tell your teens why that is the rule in your home. It is a strong boundary, and you are putting it because you need to protect them, right? And I think that is going to be the key. If you have a good relationship with your child, they're going to understand that. They're going to push back, of course, because kids want what they want, right? But they're going to understand that you are trying to protect them from hard things and difficult situations. Right. So just be clear, nonchalant. It's not, we're not like, it just is what it is. And in that realm, you can discuss and agree upon what consequences they should get if there is a situation where they violate these rules. And you can actually have that conversation. What do you think should happen if you drink alcohol at a party, or if you drive under the influence or whatever? What do you think? Let's talk about this together and come up with a plan. I think thinking that our kids will not do drugs and alcohol is maybe not, we wish, right? As parents, obviously, we're praying that they don't make those choices, but they may. And so we just need to be able to give guidance during those times, right? And I think one of the errors sometimes is like, I can't believe you. Why did you do that, right? But like, hey, what led you to do this? What is going on? Did someone, encourage you? Were you feeling out of place? I mean, what, and really discuss this with your child, and not go against them, but go towards them in that sense of, okay, so how can you avoid this situation moving forward, right? And how can we work through this? Because you can tell them all the things they did wrong and then not give them any solutions on how to get out of it the next time. But let's be proactive and let's actually say, okay, maybe the next time you shouldn't go to a party when those, if with that crowd, or maybe when you go, you should, be able to like call, I'm willing to pick you up anytime, no matter what, just let me know, like come up with a plan. So give more guidance than lecture, I would say. Explain, what you can do, right? So maybe you could do some role playing with your child and say, okay, if somebody says, what, here, why don't you have this or try this? Come on, why don't you're being such a baby, whatever the case is, help them to get out of that situation by what they say, right? Kind of role play. What are your options if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, here, have this, or you should try this, or come on, don't be a, whatever. And so how do you role play getting out of that? Another important point is to be accessible during a crisis. Let's say your kid drove in his car, drank, and now can't drive back home. Mom says and dad says, if you're ever in a crisis and you shouldn't take the car, I'm willing to pick you up, no questions asked, and take you home. Do not get in a car with somebody that's been drinking. Do not get in a car if you've been drinking. It's okay, I will pick you up, right? And then you have a discussion later about it, but never allow your child to take a dangerous risk because you're not willing to meet them and help them through it, okay? I know that the instinct is to go all nuts as a parent. I know, I promise but let's do it differently. Let's allow them to make choices while they're still in your home so you can work through them with them. Okay. Control access to prescription medicine and alcohol. If you have drugs and alcohol in your home and kids have access to it, they are more likely to actually access them. So if there's, if you're a drinking family and there's alcohol there is definitely a chance your child is going to try the alcohol in your home. So whatever you want to do with that, you need to think about that. If you want to put your alcohol in a closed location, lock it down, your medicines, your prescribed medicines in a place where they can't be reached. These are things to think about as parents, because you are giving an example to your children. And so you need to decide what you're going to do with that. Discuss social media use.
Yes.
That's important. I think some studies really show that teens spend an average of 9 hours a day on digital devices. And this, you might not be aware of the peer pressure and the just way this is impacting their mental health, cyber bullies, predators, that kind of thing. So, I think this is important. So just keep an eye on the social media. So I feel like nowadays we're kind of giving access too early, too soon to social media platforms. And it really is affecting kids and distorting kids' views of themselves, of others, because a lot of the pictures are not like reality. And so it's tricky, but do your best on seeing what social media they're on, what they're seeing, discuss things with them. Make it okay for your kids to talk about how they feel, if they feel sad, if they feel depressed, whatever they are going through. Your home is the safe space. Your home is a place where they can feel like they can be themselves. They can talk about what's going on in their lives. And if they're able to do that, then they feel like they don't have to go out and do something else to soothe those, feelings or discomforts. So let's provide a space of supportiveness in your home and have open communication with your kids. And lastly, just keep an eye on how they're coping with changes in their lives, with, adjustments in life changes, as far as like if they're going to college, if they're transitioning a grade, if school is getting harder, like watch them as a transition. If they have problems with friends, just keep an eye and make sure that you are not seeing any signs that may be troubling. And if you are, just seek help for them. Yeah.
And Nicole, as we were approaching the 2-minute mark, as the show draws to a close, and one of the things we discussed earlier was the importance of connecting with your teen and signs of substance use that parents need to look for. So just to end it up.
Yeah. So just, really building your teen self-esteem. A lot of times as parents, we focus on the things our kids are doing negatively, but we really have to change our mind and think, what are my kids doing great? And let me look at that and let me tell them many times so that they build confidence, assertiveness, strength to handle tough things that come because they feel like they can. So build their self-esteem. Obviously, don't let your kids be unsupervised for too long. Like if teens are out for like, I don't know, 4 to 5 hours. I mean, I think, you just got to make sure you know where they are, what they're up to, who they're with, right? I think these things are important. I don't want to seem like you would be a helicopter parent, but I think it's important to know where they are, what they're doing. In my opinion, nothing good happens after midnight, but that's just mine. Know their friends and who they're with. That's important. And of course, be a role model. If you have strict rules on not smoking, not drinking alcohol, not drugs, are you following that? And are you teaching them that that's how it goes? And if for any reason, anyone listening is struggling with any of this, alcohol drinking or drug use, please reach out for help. There's many ways of help. There's, different groups that you can attend. There's, therapy. There's programs that can help in alcohol and drug recovery. So do ask for help for yourself or your child if you're noticing any of this. And of course, lastly, the signs of substance use that parents need to look out for real quick. Change in friendships, drop in grades, lack of motivation, red eyes or increased use of eye drops, secretiveness or moodiness, staying by themselves often, appetite changes. And these are all just things that obviously, you know your child, so when these things are changing and they seem odd, right? Violence or destructiveness, if you see any of this, just, using air fresheners, incense to cover the smell of cigarettes or marijuana, those types of things, just keep an eye out because some of these, they come kind of together. So, your child and make sure you're speaking truth into their lives. They do not have to conform to the patterns of this world, right? Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, and that by testing you may discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect. And so remind your kids that they don't have to do what the world does and that they can make their own choices for their own good and that you trust that they can do that. So that's a wrap.
That's awesome, Nicole. And, my prayer when it comes to difficulties and facing adversity, and now as it relates to addiction, I always ask the Lord for the wisdom to know what's right and for the courage to act on it.
Yes.
So may that twofold grace guide us as we, continue to discuss this very, very important topic. Thank you so much. This was awesome. And it is time to close the show. Nicole, we thank you once more for joining us today and shedding light on this topic of talking to our kids about drugs and alcohol. We hope you've learned about why this is an important conversation to have. And thank you for joining our show today. Again, if you joined this program midstream, you can find this show and others on podcasts at Wellspring on the Air or on our blog on wellspringmiami.org. The title of today's show again was Talking to Our Kids About Drugs and Alcohol. Encourage us and let us know you are listening by sending comments or questions to ontheair@wellspringmiami.org. This is Mario de Armas with Wellspring on the Air, because hearts and minds matter.